Hi, everyone. I am here to talk about the dark side of Carl Jung that his followers conveniently forget to mention. He was also one of the first people to study and write extensively about the archetype known as the collective unconscious. In Jungian psychology, the collective unconscious is a universal memory bank of experiences shared by all humans, containing primordial images called archetypes that are universal in nature. One of the most famous Jungian archetypes is the hero, which is found in stories all over the world. Now, if you haven't heard about Carl Jung, you probably know his name from the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is based off his theories. He argued that women's emotions were controlled by their subconscious minds, which were dominated by primal instincts and desires. Because of this, Jung believed that women could not be trusted with positions of power or authority. He believed that they were too easily swayed by their emotions and would make decisions based on irrational factors rather than logic and reason. Like many men of his time, Jung believed that women were inferior to men and should be subservient to them. Jung suffered from several mental health issues throughout his life, including schizophrenia and paranoia. These conditions may have caused him to view the world in a more negative and fearful way, leading him to believe that women were dangerous and should be avoided. Jung's views on women were a product of his time, but we should not repeat those mistakes today. We should strive to create a world where women are treated equally and where their voices are heard. This societal bias against women likely contributed to Jung's belief that women were too emotional and irrational to be trusted with positions of power. This is apparent in his 1925 work, A Psychological Theory of Types, where he states, well, for one thing, it is important to remember that even brilliant minds like Jung are not immune to bias and prejudice. If you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos on the dark side of psychology. Thank you for watching. Just because someone is smart and successful in one area does not mean that they are free from biases in other areas. Jung's views on women were clearly influenced by his personal experiences and the societal norms of his time period. But that does not make his views any less harmful. The feminine psyche is so constituted that its natural attitude is one of subordination, and it seeks no domination. Jung's writings on women were not just abstract theories. They were concrete statements that had real-world consequences. By spreading these harmful beliefs, Jung contributed to a culture of sexism and discrimination against women, but only a harmonious cooperation. However, not all of Jung's ideas have stood the test of time. Despite believing that women were inferior, that women were inherently evil, and that they were the source of all evil in the world. But where did he get these ideas? Well, as we mentioned before, a lot of Jung's theories were inspired by his own experiences and the experiences of those close to him. For example, Jung's mother was a very dominant and controlling woman who was seen as too masculine by Jung. This experience, along with other negative experiences with women in his life, led Jung to believe that women were inferior and should not be in positions of power. He claimed that women were too focused on themselves and their own desires, and were not concerned with the well-being of others. This is apparent in his 1934 work, Psychology and Alchemy, where he states, the woman as the anima represents the unconscious, the source of all evil and of all that is opposed to the conscious rational mind. Jung also believed that they were dangerous and that they should be feared. He claimed that women were inherently sexual creatures who used their sexuality to manipulate and control men. Jung believed that women were driven by a desire for power and that they would do whatever it took to obtain it. This is seen in his book, Psychology of the Transference, where Jung writes, the woman is essentially unconscious and instinctive, and her understanding of the world is entirely determined by her libido. She can never reach the intellectual level of the man because she lacks the capacity for abstract thinking. Well, he had a lot of sources of inspiration, and later, his wife Emma who he refers to as Emma in his writings, had an affair which led to a separation. These constant disappointments and hurts caused Jung to develop a deep mistrust of women, which would later influence his writing and theories. But one of them was his own life experiences. And many of these experiences were negative, especially when it came to women. You see, Jung's mother was a domineering woman who had an unhealthy obsession with her youngest son, which caused a rift between him and his father. This created a very difficult childhood for young Karl, who was often left out of family activities and felt isolated from his own siblings. If you look at some of his writings, specifically those on women, they read shockingly bigoted and reveal his own personal traumas and how he allowed them to color his worldview. Jung believed that women were inferior to men and that they lacked the capacity for rational thought. He claimed that women were ruled by their emotions and that they were too focused on things like marriage and motherhood to be able to have meaningful careers. This is evident in his book Psychology of the Unconscious, in which he writes, "The feminine psyche is indeed very important, but it is essentially different from the masculine psyche. It is more irrational, more instinctual, and less adapted to intellectual activity." So let us take a closer look at the darker side of Jung and see what we can learn from it. So where did this famous psychologist get all his ideas from? In adulthood, one of Jung's first serious relationships ended when his fiancée broke off their engagement to marry someone else. One of the ways this mistrust manifested itself was in Jung's view of female psychology. Jung also believed that women were too emotional, and that this made them unpredictable and unreliable. But it gets worse. Jung even went as far as to say, it's obvious that Jung had some seriously messed up beliefs about women. Another factor that influenced Jung's views was the patriarchal society in which he lived. Additionally, Jung's own struggles with mental health may have also played a role in his views on women. So it's clear that Jung's views on women were deeply flawed and harmful. But what can we learn from this? It's also important to remember that words have power. Finally, it's important to learn from the mistakes of the past. We hope that you enjoyed this video and that it gave you a new perspective on Carl Jung and his impact on our understanding of psychology.